Ok, siamo pronti per continuare il programma che oggi è molto serrato e quindi va tutto di fila. Chiamo il prossimo ospite, è un gradito ritorno, è stato con noi già a BTO 2010, right? If I remember well, a BTO 2010. Il direttore di sviluppo di Review Pro, Josiah Mackenzie. Josiah has a blog that everyone reads, not only in the States, but all the hoteliers in Italy too. I know that because I see what they say. The stage is all yours.
Thank you very much, Giancarlo. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Today I'd like to take you to a place that can teach us a couple of things when it comes to innovation. This conference is about innovation, and it's very helpful to look at areas of the world where innovation is happening and think about how we can use some of the principles and observations from that in our businesses. So the place that I'd like to take you is really a trendsetter. And what happens here is seen around the world. There's a lot of creativity in this location. A lot of the best minds in technology, science, the arts, architecture, business and finance find themselves in this location. And actually, the place that I'm talking about isn't Shanghai that we have here in the photo. It's not Rome or Milan or London, New York. It's actually Florence, 500 years ago. And there was a lot of things going on at this point in time that we can learn from when we think about innovation and creativity. Of course, during this time, there was the Medici family gained a lot of influence through their innovations in banking and finance, and they used a lot of that money to sponsor various creative professionals in a wide variety of areas. Of course, in finance and trade, but also in arts, in sculpture, in painting, in philosophy. And what happened is that each of these creators, of course, well-known names that we know now, Michelangelo, Galileo, Leonardo da Vinci, all spending time in Florence, they not only pursued their craft individually, but they got to know each other. And some of these walls between these different areas came down. And of course, looking back on this time in history, we see that there was a huge amount of things that happened here that caused an enormous amount of creativity, a whole era that we refer to as the Renaissance throughout Italy, throughout Europe. And so, for this reason, there's a number of business innovation consultants that look back on this time period when they think about creativity, trying to understand what happened here in Florence and how can we apply some of this to our businesses and to our organizations. One of these individuals is named Franz Johansson, and he writes in his book, The Medici Effect, when you step into an intersection of fields, disciplines, or cultures, you can combine existing concepts into a large number of extraordinary new ideas. So it's this combination of taking ideas from all these different locations. When the event kicked off, on the introduction slide, you could see there's about 20 or 30 different technology trends, everything from human-to-human interaction to wearable technology to artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of different technologies and innovative new things out there. The potential I see is bringing these together, and so that's what I'd like to talk about today. If we go fast forward to just 4 years ago, BTO 2010, it was really an exciting time in technology. A lot of social technologies, mobile technologies, and we were discussing what all of this transparency and openness meant. You can see up here on the slide, we have this whole idea of not underestimating the power of one person in the internet. the consumer, our guests, were very connected. They were empowered through these technologies. And we were thinking about websites like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and what it meant for our businesses. How do we take these new emerging technologies and opportunities and make them work for us? Now, of course, what was the big question and the big thing that we were trying to process at that point was thinking how this affects each area of our business. So while these different technologies presented marketing opportunities, there was the question of what does this mean for revenue? How do we tie this back to something that makes a solid business case for us? So because of that, it looked very interesting, but there's a lot of question marks. I think many of us underestimated the impact of new technologies, and including myself. So in the past 4 years, there's been a lot of development in these technologies, a lot of new ways of using what appeared 5-6 years ago and thinking about using it in different areas of the travel and hospitality business. So I'll give you a couple examples of this. Thinking about staff hiring, evaluation, performance measurement. Now it's very common for hotel groups to incorporate online guest feedback into looking at the performance of their staff. I know many hotel groups that evaluate general manager hotel candidates based on how they've been able to improve guest satisfaction on some of these online review sites. And then, of course, because there's hundreds or thousands of comments left every year for most hotels, in each area, whether it's food and beverage or the front desk, reception area, there's often a tremendous amount of feedback that is useful for training purposes, for evaluating the quality of how service is being offered. So we see a tremendous amount of use in the area of staff and hiring and HR. We also see a strong use of these technologies in the area of revenue management. Now, of course, the practice of revenue management in hospitality is relatively new. Around the last 10 years, there's been an emergence of a new way of looking at all the different demand criteria for a hotel, whether that's the number of people looking to visit the area, different prices of different hotels, and there's various technologies out there that look at how to provide the best recommendations on rate. So this area of revenue strategy has emerged recently, and even in the area of social technologies, guest feedback, we see now that playing a role in revenue management. There was a study done by Cornell University in the US about 2 years ago now that was very exhaustive. It looked at 2 years of online guest reviews and then looked at the relationship between those reviews and the willingness of people to spend money on a hotel. So revenue per available room, the average daily rate at a hotel, and found a very strong connection. And it makes sense. When we're looking out there, most booking sites will include some sort of online review score attached to it. So all that to say, now we have the opportunity to look at the relationship between online guest satisfaction and pricing power. So the area of revenue management has adopted a lot of these new social technologies. And because of the impact on revenue management, investors and hotel owners are now starting to look at a lot of these new technologies and the data that is created through it as well. We've worked with a number of hotel investors around the world recently to assess where money should be spent in a hotel. How do they invest money to stay competitive with other hotels? In the case of investors looking to acquire a hotel, oftentimes they'll look at online feedback as a way to understand if this is a good investment, what the value, how much they should pay for it, and then when they're selling, of course, they're referencing this information as well. We have new brands looking at guest feedback and a lot of the content that's created through social and mobile technologies. It's a great way for them to understand what consumers want, how they can create a brand that's relevant to that. And then even in the area of tourism policy, we have organizations like the United Nations World tourism organization put out a report about a month ago recommending that online guest feedback be incorporated into the star rating classification systems for hotels. So it's really extraordinary, just over the span of a couple years, watching how something that began as perhaps a marketing program, something that many hotels were experimenting with to try to engage with their guests, there's been this huge side benefit of a lot of data being created, and that data having implications in many different areas of hospitality beyond the original vision for a lot of social media. Okay? The big opportunity for connecting all these different opportunities and data and technologies is really made possible because every tourism and every hotel business exists within an ecosystem of a lot of different factors. So if we think about it for a moment, just using hotels as an example, we have external entities like government tourism and hospitality ministries. We have star rating organizations. We have destination marketing organizations. There's, of course, universities and academic institutions. There's research and advisory firms and owners and investors. So a lot of different organizations that affect the hotel business. Internally, of course, there's many different functions and jobs in a typical hotel. You have guest services. That, of course, is highly affected by the staff and how they were recruited, how your staff is trained. It's affected by the operational policies and procedures. There's revenue strategy, sales and marketing. So you can see in just a single hotel how many different areas there are. And of course, these are highly, highly connected. And so this is where we see the opportunity for sort of this Medici effect of bringing together different departments, different data sets that were previously separate into working with each other and sharing information, sharing data. And so if we just look at a couple examples here, so thinking about a hotel owner or investor, right? They're connected with many different organizations. Of course, they have relationships with the financial institutions that provided them with capital or money for their projects. We have, their relationships with research and advisory firms looking at big trends that are happening in the market. Of course, their operations are highly affected by government policy, how the destinations are promoting themselves, their relationships with different universities and academic institutions. And then, of course, the owners then are looking at the hotels and all the different functions that are going on at a hotel. So if you're a general manager looking after guest services and thinking about the guest experience, of course, there's many different factors that go into this process. A guest services, of course, very dependent on the staff. The guest experience that's provided is connected to loyalty, and that loyalty, of course, highly affects sales and marketing, revenue strategy. So each of these relationships, of course, has existed for decades, for hundreds of years. This is not something new, and this isn't something necessarily brought about by technology. What is new is that there's more opportunities than ever before for these different, perhaps separate organizations or companies to interact with each other. Okay, so there's also a couple of technological factors that go into this interconnected environment that we live in. One is more and more data opening up between various reporting systems and databases through API connections, right? So if I'm a research or advisory company, or if I'm a general manager, I likely have multiple dashboards that I'm looking at to understand the performance of my hotel in various areas. These technology companies are exchanging data more and more with each other, so they're able to provide their users with a seamless report of all these different areas in one screen and one dashboard, right? There's also technology innovations like mobile and wearable technology. And oftentimes this is presented in a very futuristic sort of way, like the image on the screen, where it's almost like from a movie, where maybe I have Google Glass and I'm looking out over a city and I can see all kinds of different information about different areas and different things in that city. Wearable technology takes that to a whole another level, right? Because whether I'm wearing a smartwatch or I have some sort of sensor embedded in clothing, it's going to be constantly connecting information or collecting information, and then that, of course, presents an interesting business opportunity, right? The Internet of Things is only extending that. So rather than collecting data from things that we're wearing, of course, whether it's in a home or a business, it will be constantly tracking, recording, whether it's a refrigerator with food, and then optimizing for that. So when we look at some of these next generation technologies, we might think that's a little bit outside the scope of my day-to-day hotel management role, right? But when we think about it from a business standpoint, the fact that we'll have more and more data collected allows us to have much more information to work with when it comes to creating new intersections and new connections between different areas. Feedback, for example, will move away from becoming just a one-time guest survey into something that's constantly collected, right? Whether it's something that we're wearing, whether it's somehow connected to the Internet of Things for hospitality, information and data is constantly collected, and we're probably a number of years away from seeing this in its fullest extent. But now we can begin thinking about this opportunity of interconnectivity as we think about different technologies. I like this quote from Drake Bayer. He says, "Technology has brought us to a point where customers are continually signaling what they do and do not want, and companies are responding to those spoken and measured needs as quickly and as effectively as they can." So again, just this whole idea of always being connected, and rather than it being something where we have our mobile devices and maybe we're texting a hotel or snapping a photo and uploading it, this stuff happens automatically. And so we're moving in this direction where the companies that will have this advantage will be the ones that can pick up this constant collection of feedback and be able to use that to improve the guest experience. Okay. The connections create value in a number of different ways. So we looked at Florence 500 years ago, where there was so much innovation, where all of these creators came together and worked together, and by breaking down the barriers between their different areas, whether it was architecture or art or banking, they were able to come up with new solutions. And so thinking about what this means for in the relationship of data and technologies in hospitality and travel. These connections create value in a number of different ways. One is creating value through efficiency. So most jobs in hospitality aren't like an assembly line. It's not like we have a conveyor belt coming by and we're building something and it goes on to the next person. But in most jobs, the work or the interactions of the person before me affects my work, right? And the work that I'm doing affects the work of the person next to me. Whether it's a guest, the interaction that I have affects that guest, and there's this ongoing effect. Efficiency comes in when we think about the hotel as a very interconnected environment where everything has an effect on something else. And also we think about data and technology in this way as well. So by understanding this whole ecosystem of things together, we can spot areas for optimizing for efficiency and effectiveness. There's also an opportunity of creating new ways of doing things, new technologies, by connecting data and insight as well. Bruce Brown is the Chief Technical Officer of Procter & Gamble, and he says, often the connection of seemingly unconnected technologies delivers disruptive ideas. The magic happens when companies create space and opportunity for those connections, right? So again, thinking about bringing all this together and creating some new things by combining data sets. Just to give you an example, again, we talked a little bit about revenue management and technology. Something that we've done over the past year is working in the area of revenue management. And again, trying to look at hotels from the perspective of guests. There's companies that look at many different data factors and then recommend rates for hotels to charge. Ideas is one of those companies. So we've worked with them to take guest ratings and guest feedback data, incorporate it into the other data sets that they're looking at, and then provide recommendations on a night-by-night basis. So they can say tonight and Tuesday in Florence, depending on all these factors and your guest satisfaction level, you can charge this rate. And for hotels that deliver a superior guest experience, this allows them to charge incrementally higher rates, whether it's 5 euros, 10 euros, 20 euros a night, and directly attribute it to this insight. So it's a great example of bringing together some very different areas, revenue and guest satisfaction data, to create something that's new. Okay? So we've seen in the past, whether it's in Florence, whether it's on social media like Facebook and Twitter, and whether it's in the whole ecosystem of travel and hospitality, everything is very interconnected. And with the rise of mobile and wearable technologies, this will only increase. This is going to speed up as time goes on. So how can we use this? How do we leverage this trend for our businesses? There's a couple goals. There's the consumer-facing goal of improving the guest experience, the guest journey. And there's a number of ways to look at this. One of the ways is thinking pre-stay, during a guest stay at a hotel, and then after the stay. So if you're an email marketing company, for example, you might send some information in advance. You might send an email with activities to do while someone is on property. And then after the stay, you might send an email collecting feedback, right? So thinking about integrating these different areas with technology, of course, most hotel groups have a number of different technology solutions to manage different areas of their business. So if we think about improving the guest experience, of course, the critical component is the guest profile. So as you're interacting with a hotel guest before the stay, during the stay, whether it's in person, and you're collecting this information, and then after the stay, you want to have as much information on that guest as possible so that you can personalize and tailor the experience to create this really a seamless guest stay for that person. And there's companies like Hoxel that do a great job of thinking about tying together these different data elements in one place. But of course, there's other technology systems at play here, right? So there's the property management system. You have contact relationship management software as well. And so you have to make sure that these different components interact with each other and work together in order to create these guest profiles that can be used at any point by hotel staff or with your various technologies. So to enable that, it's critical to have technology that works well with each other, right? So again, just thinking from our business in the area of guest feedback and guest satisfaction measurement, something that we've worked very hard to do is enable that data to be used in any area within hotel technology. So whether it's marketing, social CRM, guest surveys, distribution, your booking engine, thinking about ways that we can take that information, and whether it's on a hotel side or on the consumer side, use that to have a better understanding of the guests and make better decisions. Okay, and then thinking about it from a hotel level, if I'm working at a hotel, depending on my area of responsibility, there can be an opportunity to take these different sets of information and bring them together. So we talked a little bit about revenue and distribution. That's an opportunity. And we talked a little bit about sales and marketing. But there's a huge opportunity now for hotel managers and really anyone within the hotel to think about bringing these elements together. So thank you very much.
Josiah, thank you. I'd like to invite you to take a seat. Maybe we can get the lights up, please. And we're going to introduce what we call as a talkbacker, Pedro Colaco from Guest-Centric. Welcome.
Thank you, Philip. Hi, Josiah.
Hello, Pedro.
Very interesting stuff. Go ahead.
Before Pedro gets started, if any of you have a question, just get me and we'll interrupt Pedro. He's used to it. So take away.
Very interesting stuff about technology and APIs. I'm sure in the audience, not a lot of people know what API stands for. So what do you think hotels, and namely in Europe, there's a lot of independent hotels, can do to get up to speed on technology and interconnections?
Sure. So there's, a wide variety of us in the room might work in different functions. Maybe a small hotel, maybe a technology company, maybe a hotel brand. APIs are basically just a behind-the-scenes way for different technology products to talk to each other. And so information can flow very easily between them. If you're a technology company, of course, the opportunity is working with other technology companies to create that. I think if you're an independent hotel manager and thinking about how to leverage some of this opportunity, where this comes into play is thinking about the different technology partners that you decide to work with, asking them what's their approach to sharing information and sharing data and insights with the other products that you're using.
Okay, and so what would be the top 3 criteria to go and ask those questions?
Yeah, well, I think it varies so much depending on the situation that you're working within. If you're a small hotel of 20 rooms, it's going to be a very different situation than if you have a city hotel with 500 rooms. And so depending on that situation, I think the questions are basically around how are you bringing together these different job functions or these different roles within a hotel, whether it's sales and marketing, revenue and distribution, to create new, innovative ways of looking at things.
Okay. Now having that said, ReviewPro obviously consolidates review data. How do you deal with, consolidating all of this review data from all the different sources that you have, like TripAdvisor and Booking.com, and there's guest surveys? How do you deal with that, and how do you actually make sure that there's a unified experience towards the hotel manager so that they can get some insight?
Sure. So we go and we index reviews from about 150 different review sites at ReviewPro. And the idea here is, why I talked about mobile and wearable technology is that the trend is toward using these technologies to open up, to have a very transparent view and perspective of the guest experience for other guests. And so that's where sites like TripAdvisor, I think, became popular in that they were founded around this premise of technology should open things up, it should empower the consumer, and of course the business side of that is we have access to more and more information. Whether it's on our phones or through some of these online review sites, we can basically say whatever we want, however we want. There's almost an unlimited amount of ways that we can share our hotel experience, and that's only increasing, right? So what we're doing is going to all these different review sites, bringing it together into one place so that you can see, regardless of what format people prefer, you'll be able to see it in one place.
And what kind of operational insights do people derive from that information, i.e., is it more of an operational thing in terms of, my air conditioning is broken, or is it more of a sales and marketing or guest relations thing? Can you give us a couple of examples of, things that hotels were able to find out and actually change in the way they deal with guests?
Sure, and oftentimes it's very practical. So we were working with one hotel that was actually a brand new hotel in a city center location, and they'd been open about 9 months, and what was really interesting is that even though it was a spectacularly designed hotel and very professional staff, and it was run very well, an experienced general manager, they were just not doing well on many online review sites. And so when they looked at all the feedback from across the web, they found that it was actually their breakfast offering that was giving the majority of negative feedback. So, of course, people have different preferences for breakfast. I might like an omelet, you might like fresh fruit for breakfast, and so, but it was really remarkable across all these different review sites. People were saying that, there wasn't enough options, the food was cold, and so what could have been a great experience, because of this, they were leaving negative reviews. And so, they sent that back to the person responsible for the breakfast. They made changes and were able to, after they fixed, a couple of these very small items, improve their overall ranking. So for most hotels, it's not an issue of everything being wrong. It's actually, there's a couple factors that you need to diagnose, identify, and then fix.
Well, but probably if I read the reviews, I was able to derive that myself. So do I really need big data analysis? So the question, I guess, becomes one of, many of these hotels get 1 to 2 reviews a week, maybe 1 to 2 reviews a month. Is there really big data, and how can they drive more data into those review sites? So I guess it's a two-part question, right? The first part is, do I really need big data if I don't have a lot of data? And the second is, how can I drive, more reviews so that I can get more insights about what's going well and not so well with my hotel?
Sure. So today, I think many of the hotels we work with will get at least several dozen reviews every month. And so for the smaller hotels, the larger hotels get many more than that. So it's really a factor of how many people are staying there. Looking ahead a couple of years to where technology is going, you can see that with these mobile and wearable technologies. Again, data will be less about one review at the end of a stay and more about constantly giving feedback through a number of different ways. So the amount of data is increasing. There's more review sites. People are leaving more reviews. If we look at the amount of overall reviews across, looking at our own data for hotels, there's more reviews left in the past year than the past 5 years combined. So there's a huge amount of growth in the amount of data. It's not at 100% yet. I would like it to be at a place where every single guest is leaving multiple pieces of data for their stay. And so technologies like surveys presented through a mobile format or things like this are helping hotels increase the amount of reviews. And just a very simple tactical thing, we work with a lot of hotels at the end of a survey after they submit a piece of feedback. We ask them to share that on the web, right? Whether it's a review site or a social network. And so the idea is that you're constantly creating more and more content online, which helps increase your presence on these sites.
Gentlemen, if I may have a question for both of you. What do you think about in tourism and hospitality when individual bonuses are connected to some aggregate analysis of user-generated reviews? And I have a follow-up to that after.
It's very common. It's very common. So we have, just working at Review Pro, we have thousands of hotels around the world where their general managers are compensated. And I know at a brand level, this is true as well. It's interesting because it focuses attention around the guest experience. I think the guest experience improves as there's more and more focus on it. In terms of the financial incentives, I guess it could be argued a number of ways. Overall, we've seen positive results where guest satisfaction actually increases over time when that happens.
Pedro, you have a point of view on that?
I think there's many studies that show that user reviews have a direct impact on the willingness to stay, right? I think I've seen an interesting study by a small agency called Sticky Media that said that 30% of people change their hotel after they've made the selection based on what they read online. So there's definitely some hard data there that there's a correlation between good user reviews and good performance. Now, whether you want to tie, a bonus to that or give actually consumers a bonus, sometimes we also have hotels that say, you put a review online and you'll get 10% off the next time you stay here. I think it's a slippery slope. That's what I would say.
So as a follow-up to that, what I'm getting on my phone here is in the New York Times yesterday. For those, I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen it.
Is there a camera here somewhere? Can you pick that up? It's probably. Is that too small? So there's an article in yesterday's New York Times. Okay. It's called The Art of the Amateur Online Review. The Art of the Amateur Online Review. Might want to take a look at it. But there's actually professionals now helping people write reviews to trick the semantic search engines and the analyses, to trick the rating. It's sort of like SEO, but for user reviews. Yeah. And on top of that, it mentions how annoying it is after you're all done and you tip the driver or the tour guide, he or she then hammers the customers to please give them all 5. So how do you think this will sort out? Because this couldn't be possibly good for our industry.
It definitely, I don't see that as a positive development, let's put it that way. But I do think that as volume increases, right, and there's more in-stay feedback mechanisms, and we're seeing that across the globe, that there's actually a lot of in-state feedback mechanisms, that if data grows, that it's going to be harder to trick the system, right? I think also that, you know, when you have validation of reviews with stays and stuff like that, that's going to help somewhat. But it's a hard issue. I think there's going to be technology solutions to that, right, to detect fake reviews. But it's a hot topic in the industry for the last 10 years, so I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon.
If I could just add one thing, I think the more data that's collected and the more it moves away from, I got a 5-star rating on this site and then I get this much money, where you're looking at factors that it's impossible for one person to ask for something that will give them more compensation. So different data sources, different ways of processing this, it becomes more effective. And also, perhaps owners looking at this, different people analyzing the performance of managers and people on the hotel staff. Just a quick example, there's a department store in New York City that I shop at, and the lines used to be horrendous. The customer service was absolutely terrible. And they went through a whole process of reimagining that. One of the key factors was the collection of feedback when you're paying. After you pay with your credit card, there's a one-question survey, you know, was your shopping experience, you know, something you would recommend to someone else? And just that constant collection where almost everyone is giving this feedback, not only the person that checks you out is going to treat you better, but the management at that store can improve the experience.
Maybe one last question. You talked a little bit about personalization. I think personalization is a huge topic right now, at least in the hotel industry. Give us, you know, maybe some insight on what you think about this topic and what hotels can start doing with, you know, minimal tech investment for personalizing their offers to their guests.
Sure. So I would think about the technology that you already have in your hotels as a starting point. There's in some groups, there's a jump to immediately jump to a mobile application as the solution for everything. It doesn't have to be dependent on a mobile app to personalize the guest experience. You know, maybe it's sending out an email and recording it in your CRM system so that when the person checking in at the hotel, you understand that they've been there 10 times before and they like this and that, or pre-arrival email. You know, there's companies like Hoxel that do this email collection and do that without mobile. But I would begin with the technology set the hotels have. And again, looking at the technology providers that they use, ask them how, I guess they can share more guest information, whether it's in marketing, sending out email marketing, whether it's in advertising, whether it's in guest services. So start with what you have and just think about ways of sharing that information you've already collected in different areas of the hotel.
Just to follow up on that, do you think it's worthwhile to go on people's Facebook pages and Twitter feeds and try to understand what they're talking about, or do you think that's a lot of mambo-jambo and it really doesn't drive much value for the hotels?
It can be. I would recommend thinking about the human kind of cost to that. So if you're a general manager, they can create an expectation if you've done it once that every guest, especially that same guest, if you come back later, let's say a month later, and I had a little gift in your room based on something I saw you tweet, if they don't experience that again, or if I tweet and there's no one there to respond in 5 minutes, it creates this expectation that when failed creates disappointment. But it can be a great way, especially a public Facebook page or Twitter is more of a public environment. If I tweet about something and you can tell that, you know, I love food or I love whatever, and then I provide some little, you know, experience based on that, that can be a great way to create a story that I'm going to share with my friends.
Okay, all right. Do you have any questions?
Where? Over there. We have a question. I need a microphone to go there. Can I have a mic? Thank you very much. We have time for one question.
I have one more. If you need.
Sì, prova.
Dunque, io non so se è la giusta platea per rivolgere questa domanda,
I'll
però
do the translation then.
ultimamente TripAdvisor, quando noi andiamo a una ricerca di un albergo inserendo il nome direttamente dell'albergo, ci propone ulteriormente altri concorrenti. Ora questa situazione
He's saying when he does a research on TripAdvisor, he has other hotels that came out when he made a research on a specific hotel.
cioè, prima uno metteva Hotel Hilton e appariva direttamente Hotel Hilton. Adesso appare Hotel Hilton e poi TripAdvisor dice però potrebbero anche interessarti questi alberghi più economici o più belli. Quindi ci fa fare una competizione nella competizione.
So what he's saying, it came out other hotels saying you should be interested also in other different kind of hotels, maybe more economics than the one I'm searching about.
Lo trova giusta questa politica?
You find it right?
So the recommendation, I guess the ability of a site like TripAdvisor to recommend hotels.
To recommend alternative hotels.
Alternative hotels.
The way I understand it is,
Yeah.
somebody's looking for a specific hotel, and TripAdvisor recommends alternative hotels to stay at, whether that is a good thing or a bad thing.
Right. Well, for the consumer, I mean, it gives more options, and I think that from a consumer-facing business standpoint, it creates more options. For the hotel, you know, obviously, you know, they're going to be seeing hotels that are not your hotel, right? So TripAdvisor, and it's not just TripAdvisor, I think it's really any of these sites that are collecting feedback and using it to assist the decision-making of consumers. Their whole business is based around offering as many options as possible, so in a very transparent environment. And so in that, it's going to exist whether or not, as hotels, we participate in it. So understanding, you know, where the hotel's positioned, what kind of market that you're going after, it really increases the need, I guess, to improve your presence on that site.
And maybe let me add on to that, which is, you know, that is a common trend in any e-commerce site. If you go on Amazon.com, right, you'll see, you're looking at books, and it'll say, people that like this book also like that book, right? So that's sort of providing you a path to your ultimate choice, for the ultimate choice to be the right choice, is kind of how all these websites work. And I think ultimately it is a good consumer experience, because you may start off saying, I want to stay at the Hilton, and then you find something else and say, you know what, maybe I'll do something different and I'll stay at a boutique hotel. And that opens up then the chance for that boutique hotel to sell their accommodation. So I guess it's ultimately a consumer choice. Okay.
Thanks to our guest, Pedro Colaco. Thanks for coming. And Josiah, thank you for coming again to BTO 2014.